Welcome to Two's Country. Over the next 13 programmes, we're going to be discovering everything that's wonderful about Great Britain. We're going to be exploring from Hadrian's Wall down to Hardy's Wessex, from the Caledonian Canal to the Llyn Peninsula. We're going to turn it upside down, go from top to bottom, root it inside out to find out everything that's glorious, fascinating and historical. I keep saying we, and the programme's called Two's Country because there are two of us, me and him. And if you think you can get away with the camera on the tripod, think again. Get it on your shoulder. You've got some walking to do. Come on, leave the tripod behind. We're starting here. I'm at a little place called Thames Head, which is in Gloucestershire, and that should give you a bit of a clue, because this marks the spot, the source of the Thames. This plaque was put here in 1857 by the conservators of the River Thames, and this is where it starts. This is the beginning of the Thames. These few rocks. Underneath here there is a spring which bursts forth to give birth to Britain's biggest and most important river, probably one of the world's most important rivers, and the river that started off London itself. It goes this way for many, many miles, so you've got some walking to do to turn this into the enormity that is the Thames in the city. Yes, I know, but I can promise you it'll get worse before it gets better. So come over the stile. Come on. We're nearly there. Up here is the main road, and it's been a main road for nearly 1,500 years. It was built by the Romans. This is Fosse Way, and it runs, stay there, watch out, it runs all the way from Devon right the way up to Lincolnshire. And the Romans used to use it as a means of communication. But lots of people thought it was to split up the country and as some sort of line of defence. That's not true. It was to get them between Cirencester and Bath. Cross very quickly, come on. Now over here, we're really beginning to see the Thames Infant. Be careful on these steps, they're very slippy. This is it, what the Romans called Themesis Fluvius, the Thames, and it starts right here. And because there's been a bit of rain, you can see it flowing very nicely. So this is it. There can be no doubt whatsoever that this is the start of the Thames. Or perhaps this is the source of the Thames. Come on down into this little hollow. This is also said to be the very beginning of Old Father Thames. It's at Seven Springs. Come on down the steps. Come on. Which is near Cirencester. It's called Seven Springs, spookily enough, because there are 7 springs here which burst out from under this wall, under this huge bank. The water is teeming with trout, and it's said to be the very beginning of the river, just like the other place. But you'll find it's a bit like King Arthur's burial ground. There's more than one of them. In fact, throughout this series, you will find that one is never enough. Now, the water comes steaming down here, and yeah, you stay there and keep your feet dry, won't you? It all goes under here into the tunnel, this tiny tunnel under the road bridge, and that's supposed to be the very beginning of the Thames. And there's a plaque above it, and proving that one is never enough, there's another plaque over there. They both say exactly the same thing, which is hic tuus. Where are you going now? Oh, all right, you go over there and I'll read that one to you. They both say, Hic tuus, O Thamesine pater, which means, hear yours, Thames father, and then it says, Septem Simonus fons, which means sort of beginning or seeds, 7 seeds, 7 beginnings, fountain. It's not very good, is it? As you can see, the river's really beginning to pick up pace now. It's been trundling faster and faster through some beautiful little villages like Somerford Keynes, which is delightful, and Ashford Keynes. And here we are at Cricklade. Now, it's incredible to think that this little river, which is still only tiny, a little further down, the Elizabethans set sail on it, and they went out all over the world. Not only that, but they mapped the world for the very first time. So you can actually say that this river has changed the shape of the world. And here it is, with its first official badge of office, the River Thames. It's a lovely little bridge, this. And most appropriate for me doing this. Here we go. And no, I'm not going to race to the other side of the bridge. I'm going to catch it in London. What's the matter? Have you never heard of poo sticks? Oh, what a sad upbringing you've had. So now you've got yourself a serious river. This is Lechlade, where the river Lech joins the... Just a minute. You've got your shadow in. If you're going to put your shadow in, at least give us a wave. Very good. The River Lech joins the Thames here, along with the River Cole. So there's a huge influx of water, which is why this, which is the very first lock on the Thames, holds back a massive amount of water. There's been a settlement here at Lechlade since 2500 BC. And the Romans came here after they built Cirencester. Incidentally, Cirencester was the second biggest Roman town in Britain after London. Now, not many people know that. Now, here's another interesting thing about Lechlade. They moved something here in 1978, which was originally at the source of the Thames. At the moment, it's behind these brand new landing stages, which have just been built. But here he is, old Man Thames himself. Like the Thames, time waits for nobody, so we've had to press on. I said before there's only 2 of us. Well, it's a bit of a lie really, because there's 3 of us. There's me, him, and there's also this, which is the Two's Country wagon, which will get us from A to B whenever we need it. We have to go now. Lechlade, which we're going through, straddles both Gloucestershire and Oxfordshire. And it's to the centre of Oxfordshire that we're going next, to Oxford itself. They go, rowing off down the river. I don't think they're going to go all the way to Putney, but that is where the race begins. This is, of course, Oxford, and that's probably one of the most photographed parts of the city. The city was founded on the Thames just before the Norman Conquest, which means about 1060. Now, of course, it's very, very famous for its university. There are 39 colleges that make up the campus, and the first one opened in 1249. The city's also famous for having Britain's oldest museum, which opened in 1683. Although I suspect we have other ideas. Yeah, that's what I thought. Still, not to worry. Let's take a big jump down the river and go full steam ahead for Goring, and a place that's world famous. Lovely and artistic, but it's getting late and very cold. Come on. Now, I promised you somewhere wonderful and very famous to finish on, for tonight anyway. This is Moulsford, near Goring, and this is a world-famous restaurant. Any cuisine book worth its salt mentions this place, and indeed it gets half a page in the best restaurants of the world. It's called the Beetle and Wedge, and it's so famous even H.G. Wells mentioned it in The History of Mr. Polly, and I think it was also in Three Men and a Boat, which is what we'll need to get there. Well, in just a short while this place will be absolutely packed, but we've managed to grab it for a moment to have a chat to an old sea dog who's moved inland to make his home on the river, Byron Alexander. Byron, this is a lovely stretch of the river, isn't it?
It's wonderful. It doesn't matter whether it's winter, summer, spring, there's always something happening, always something different. And of course it's the longest stretch of the Thames between locks. Where we're sitting now is rather lovely, and it's got a great history. It's a very old place, the Beetle and Wedge, and features in the history of Mr. Polly and one or two other nautical or Thames stories. But the whole area is super. It dates back way before Roman times.
It's a wealthy area. There's a lot of famous people around here.
It is indeed a very wealthy area. There's no denying that. Michael Caine lives a few hundred yards that way, and Pete Townsend, who did live a few hundred yards the other way. And in the village across the river, it's a question of who isn't famous rather than who is. In fact, I think in the village I'm the only person nobody's ever heard of.
Now, the old ferry went across here, didn't it?
Yes, I believe in 1964 it stopped. In 1905, over 3,000 people crossed on that little ferry to watch the village burn down. A boy called Savage set fire to the village, accidentally. Being thatched, it just went up.
An appropriate name.
Yes.
And up the river there's Wallingford, which is where William the Conqueror crossed.
Yeah, well, one goes through a big, beautiful Brunel Bridge first, and then reach Wallingford. It was the Royal Mint there as well, and William the Conqueror crossed there on his way to conquer us in December of 1066, I believe. I wasn't around at the time, although my children seem to think I was.
And what about downriver? Is there anything there?
Downriver, you've got the Goring Gap, where the River Thames literally cuts its way through the hills at Goring to get out the other side. Rather beautiful scenery there, because it's literally carved itself through the middle of a hill. It's lovely.
There's the weirs down the way with the Swan, which I think was Danny LaRue's place as well.
That's right, yes. A failed business venture for him, unfortunately.
But a beautiful place.
It is very, very, because you've got the twin towns or villages of Goring and Streatley linked by two bridges with an island in the middle separating the two, which is rather lovely down there.
So this is a special place for you?
Very much so, very much so. I couldn't live anywhere else. Having lived here, I've spoken to a lot of people who've lived on the Thames, and having lived on a river, one can never ever move off it again. The social life, the activity, I mean, one can sit at the end of the garden with a glass of lemonade on a hot day, or a coffee, as I do, and there's always something happening. Doesn't matter if it's a boat going by, or a swan with her cygnets, or a duck having a row with another duck. There's always something happening, and as the river changes, the mood changes, and as the weather changes, the mood of everything changes. It's just wonderful. It's the real England. It's the England that you read about in Jerome K. Jerome, Three Men in a Boat. It does exist, and it exists still today on the River Thames.
Right. Well, I know you're desperate for a pint, so yeah, we'll go and have one, but you're only having one because we have an early start in the morning, okay? I know, I'm late. Slight problem with the alarm clock. Now we need to press on because today we're going to go and see Runnymede, Magna Carta, you know. No, I didn't think you would. Also Hampton Court, you'll be amazed at Hampton Court, the Tower of London, Fleet Street, and the Thames Barrier, which is the end of the river. Come on! And we're doing it all in the next 15 minutes. And it's brilliant. So this is it. This is Runnymede. It used to be an island. The Thames flowed either side of this, but nowadays, although there is still a tiny island in the Thames, it's just flowing quietly on the other side of that road. And this is the memorial to the Magna Carta. This is where it was signed, and this is it. This is the Magna Carta that was signed by King John, and this is a translation of what it says. It's far too long to read it to you, so I'll tell you about it as we walk up here to an American memorial to the Magna Carta. Now, John was the brother of Richard the Lionheart, who went off on all the Crusades, and in fact was killed in one in France. Well, when he was, John took over the throne, and he was a right old nasty piece of work. He screwed down the barons and the peasants for every penny of taxes he could get. And that's why Robin Hood came to life. He was helping the poor people. Anyway, the barons eventually had enough of him. And they said, you, matey, are going to change your ways. And they drew up a list of requirements that would protect them and would protect the people of Britain. It was called the Magna Carta. And on the 15th of June, 1215, just a year before he died, John signed it. And the reason why this American memorial to the Magna Carta is here, in fact, if you have a look up there, you'll see it's erected by the American Bar Association, but be careful because you'll get dizzy looking up. The reason the Americans erected this is because the American Constitution is based on the British Magna Carta. In fact, everything that is to do with civil rights today is based upon that one piece of paper. Although really it was just to protect the wealth of the barons. So still, some things don't change. Now, with this American memorial here, there's another American connection, because just over there, there's an acre of this land in those woods, which is given to America. That is American soil over there. And in it, there's a memorial to JFK. We'll go and see it. For John, from the moment they crowned him, started acting so cunning and sly. Being king, of course, he couldn't do any wrong, but by gum, he had a good try. Come on. He squandered the ratepayers' money, all their cattle and corn he did take, till there weren't a morsel of bread in the land, and the folk had to manage on cake. It were all right in being a tyrant to vassals and folks of that class, but he tried on his tricks with the barons and all, and that's where he made his faux pas. Stanley Holloway and the Magna Carta. And this is it. Standing in an acre of American soil, a monument to John F. Kennedy, assassinated November the 22nd, 1963. And these are his words. Let every nation know whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend or oppose any foe, in order to assure the survival and success of liberty. He said that during his inaugural speech, and those words are based upon the Magna Carta. We've moved about 15 miles down the river and jumped about 300 years to come to this place. We've also leapt 5 Henrys. King John's dad was Henry II. This is to do with Henry VIII. It's Hampton Court Palace, and it's just steeped in British history. It's an unbelievable place that played such an important role with so many of our kings and queens. What? Yes, I know. It costs money, and I'll pay your share. Come on. Teddington Weir. Come on. Jog. We've got no time. Jogging's fashionable in London. This is Teddington, which is tide-ending town. This is where the tide ends, Teddington. Up these steps. Now, you know we went to the first lock, which was at St John's in Lechlade. Well, this is the last lock on the river. Beyond that, the river's tidal. That's it. On to the next one. Come on, keep jogging. Come on. Now this is another bridge, a stunner. This is Richmond, just down from Teddington. Do you know there are 27 road and rail bridges across the Thames from Teddington down to Tower Bridge, and there are another 11 that actually go under the water, and the total of the 38 bridges carry more people over the water in 1 month than crossed it by boat during the first 2,000 years. Amazing. Come on, don't sit down, come on. We're nearly there. Have a quick look over there, it's the Palace of Lambeth. That's the Archbishop's house, has been for centuries. So we've done Albert, we've done Battersea, Vauxhall, Lambeth, and we're nearly there. This one is, of course, Westminster. Thousands flock here every day for this view, and who can blame them? What a fantastic sight. The mother of all parliaments. She actually looks a lot older than she is. She's only about 150 years old. And you see here, Big Ben, he's only 141 years old. It does look a lot older than that. And do you know something that's absolutely true? The reason that Parliament takes a summer recess, thank you Big Ben, is because of this river. It used to be so dirty and smelly and horrible that the stench was too much for them to stand during the summer months. So they took a summer break, and they still do it, which is a good job really, because they do enough damage throughout the rest of the year. Come on, come on. Onward and upward, come on. Fleet next. Sir Christopher Wren's tallest spire, sometimes called the Wedding Cake Church. Do you know where you are? Come and have a look at this. This is St Bride's Church, Fleet Street. It's also referred to as the Printer's Cathedral or the Journalist's Church, because in there was our first ever printing machine. This is Fleet Street. These were the Express buildings, now completely derelict. They've all moved, all the newspapers, out to Wapping or out to Canary Wharf. And the reason this is called Fleet Street is because the River Fleet used to run down there. And the River Wandle used to run up there, which is why it's Wandsworth. And the River Walbrook ran on the other side. And this is where London started, on these two hills. This is where it grew up 2,000 years ago. The Fleet was a sewer, open sewer, because all the industry came here. They just chucked the rubbish in. It's quite appropriate, really, that they should take up their residence above it. I'll show you where the Fleet used to run, right down at the bottom here. You can see it's still running, in fact. What are you doing? It's still running down at that. I could... Does that mean I've got to drive you to the barrier? Here we go, on the way to the barrier, over Tower Bridge in London. Undoubtedly the most beautiful bridge in the city. The two sections that lift up, we're just going over them now, they weigh 1,000 tons each, and they have never ever failed since the bridge opened. And above it there's a pedestrian walkway 112 feet above the river, but they've had to close that because so many people jumped off it. Hey, look at this. Remember at Cricklade I threw my stick in? Well, here it is. You don't believe me, do you? Well, it is, and I don't care. Come on, look at this. This is the end of our journey, because officially we have now reached the end of the river with this spectacular Thames Barrier. That side is the river, this side officially is open sea. The barrier comes up in between those strange islands and it'll hold back millions and millions of tons of water and protect London from ever flooding. Over that way it goes out into the Channel, and eventually you've got yourself Normandy, and as we know, that a long, long way back up that way, near Cirencester, there's a muddy field that says it's the source of the Thames. Next time we're going to be taking a look at Hardy's Wessex. It's the imaginary county that was enjoyed by one of our greatest novelists and poets. I'll see you then. I wonder if I can get this to Normandy. 1, 2...